The day I found out my husband was cheating, it wasn't through a phone call, but from a video posted by his young secretary online. I had thought that quietly walking away would be enough, until my mother-in-law showed up, and that moment alone made me change my mind. Before we begin, drop a comment with the name of the city you're watching from. I'd love to know where we're connecting from. After class, I had just stepped out of the university lecture hall when my phone buzzed like it was just as nervous as I was. A text from my best friend, with a video attached from Instagram. I raised an eyebrow, tapped play, completely unprepared for the drama about to explode in front of me. The frame showed a fancy corporate dinner, the kind where people sip wine that costs a month's rent and order dishes with names longer than insurance contracts. Then suddenly, in the middle of all that silverware and sparkling glass, appeared a plate of powdered chocolate cupcakes and a row of bright red strawberry smoothies, like someone had confused a high-end business party with a child's birthday bash. Lauren Steele, with her shampoo commercial blonde hair, held a tiny spoon and smiled the kind of smile I bet she had practiced in the mirror 100 times. What kind of big boss orders cupcakes and smoothies for a corporate party, right? Her voice was sweet like syrup, but I could smell the sarcasm in it. I scrolled to the comments, a forest of question marks, then a string of captions from Lauren herself, like she was scripting her own vanity film. Don't be shocked. Everyone I meet just automatically wants to treat me well. They say I'm as sweet as a Starbucks Frappuccino. My boss definitely favors me. Last time I spilled coffee on a report, he just frowned and laughed, then even signed it for me. First meeting, I swapped all the water for Starbucks smoothies and ordered French fries. My boss called me creative. I like how rational he is at work, but around me, it's like he kinda loses control a little. Then the camera panned, just slightly, and I caught a side profile of Richard Bennett, my husband, right there in the frame. Richard, the man Wall Street knows as an apex predator, a deal maker with million-dollar handshakes, and a stare sharp enough to make rivals tremble. And yet, here he was, flashing a dumb grin. The kind you only see when a middle-aged man tries to act young around someone half his age. I laughed, but it was bitter. Like sipping coffee, someone forgot to sweeten. I scrolled through all the chaotic comments under Lauren's Instagram video, like watching an auction floor collapse in the middle of a storm. One person yelled, "Please stop treating this business dinner like a kid's birthday party with cupcakes and smoothies." Another comment, harsh like a Chicago winter gust. "Slaving away for the company and still bragging about the boss spoiling you? You mooch one meal and think you're a princess now?" Someone else sneered, "This world really is one giant reality show, just employees and self-hyped wannabes." And finally, a tired bit of advice. Go home, girl. Just go home. The comment section was a complete mess, yet Lauren stayed calm, casually posting even more self-obsessed captions, like she was scripting a soap opera. I calmly went through her entire TikTok archive. 3 months back, in the very first video, Richard's silhouette had already appeared. First day on the job, and I got assigned as the boss's personal assistant. Felt so safe. Who would have thought he'd pick me himself during the interview? Must be fate. In the next video, she pouted, "Just because I didn't know the job details. That old lady dared to raise her voice at me. Then, boss told me to prep drinks for the meeting, so I got smoothies for everyone. Totally our Gen Z style, right?" She winked, like she'd just invented the wheel. It was pouring rain today. I felt so drained, and not only did he let me off early, he even personally took me to a concert. Truly the perfect man I adore. If marriages can end in divorce, and divorced couples can remarry, then why freak out over a rumor? "Princess, keep shining," Lauren declared, as confidently as if she were giving a TED Talk. "Boss took me to an amusement park. Turns out being 24 can still feel like being a kid at Disneyland. We're all princesses at heart." And in the final video, her voice was sweet as cotton candy. My first business dinner with the boss? Just a bit of charm, and he pretended to step out to take a call. He couldn't even look me in the eye. She giggled, like she was sharing a secret with the whole world. Even though the office AC kept the temperature steady, I felt my blood slowly freezing. I tried to convince myself it was all in Lauren's head, but the look in Richard's eyes, that fond smile he used to reserve only for me, those things couldn't be faked. Turns out, the man I had once carefully chosen, trusted with all my heart, had betrayed me after all. Just like my father had once betrayed my mother. The year I started being with Richard, I was just 22, a law student struggling through my final exams to get into grad school, with messy hair and dark circles under my eyes from sleepless nights. Back then, he was sitting in the university's campus coffee shop, using the free Wi-Fi to build his startup, brows furrowed like he was fighting the whole world. As for me, I just needed a quiet corner to study, and somehow we always accidentally ended up sitting across from each other at that tiny two-seater table. It wasn't until much later that I found out. He'd purposely saved that seat for me. At first, he noticed me not because he liked me, but because I was quiet, not loud like the other students, just silently buried in books, never disturbing him. And me? I couldn't even recall what his face looked like, just a blurry figure behind my laptop screen. Until one day, after midterms, I caught a nasty flu, dizzy and lightheaded, and collapsed on the cafe table. When I came to, I was lying in the campus medical room, and Richard was sitting right beside me, laptop on his lap, glancing up now and then at the IV bag swaying next to me. When he saw me open my eyes, this man, who had been frowning with such worry that deep lines etched across his forehead, suddenly broke into a soft, relieved smile, like a weight had lifted. "You're finally awake," he said gently. "Your phone was locked. I couldn't reach your family, and I didn't feel right leaving you alone." I lay there, weak but strangely warm, because for the first time, someone cared for me like that. Not out of duty, but simply out of kindness. To thank him, I offered to buy him a meal. He picked a food truck right next to campus, famous for its crispy French fries and juicy grilled beef burgers. Seeing me frozen in place, wide-eyed at the never-ending menu, he burst out laughing, his laugh ringing like wind chimes. "You're a student, so spend like one. This place is great." Later, we'd go back to that cafe, sit across from each other, and chat about anything. Stroll around campus together, share hot fries, laughing over silly things. But with time, things began to change. I started waiting for him. Richard often showed up more than an hour late, shirt stained with dirt, hands dusty, dripping with sweat, but eyes glowing. The day I got my acceptance letter to grad school, he took me to celebrate in a wildflower field on the outskirts of town. The flowers blooming golden under the sunset, the breeze filled with the scent of fresh grass. In that flower field, he confessed his feelings. Turns out, for months, he'd been renting a small plot of land out there, biking every morning to water the plants and grow flowers before heading back to the cafe to handle unfinished work. I said I needed time to think, voice hesitant, heart pounding for fear of hurting him. Richard's eyes dimmed for a second, a flicker of hurt crossing his face. But he quickly regained his usual calm, giving a slight smile. "It's okay, don't feel pressured. What matters most is what you truly want." 2 months later, his startup got its first funding. He invited a group of close friends to a cozy restaurant to celebrate. In the middle of dinner, I got up to use the restroom. When I came back, I happened to overhear his friend Robert speaking through the door crack, tone low but clear. "Claire? Yeah, I know her. She's one of the standout law students. I heard her parents divorced and both remarried. That kind of background really affects a girl's personality." He went on, voice laced with sarcasm. "Didn't you say you wanted someone lively and cheerful? She's not it. Barely said a word all night. Girls like her are always scheming." Richard set his plate down, his voice dropping like a stone. Can anyone really say what it means to like someone? You think you know what kind of person you want, but when the right one shows up, you'll just know. She's it. He paused for a beat, then said more firmly, and if it's true that her parents didn't take good care of her, then I'll be the one to care for her properly. I stood outside the door, heart tightening, tears nearly falling. For the first time, someone had chosen me so firmly, not for how I looked, but for who I was. I always thought I didn't need to care whether someone loved me or not, but in that moment, hearing Richard defend me like that, I felt this warmth spread through me, like sunlight clearing the fog. Being with him was a decision I had thought through so carefully, weighing every risk, but no amount of calculation ever matches fate. You can plan 1,000 ways, but sometimes it's the plans you never make that change your life. After finishing work at the university, I took a cab to Richard's company tower, my head still buzzing with Lauren Steele's TikTok videos. Anything that makes you feel uneasy has probably been wrong for a long time. I pushed open Richard's office door and froze for a second at the sight before me. A young woman in a ridiculously short, tight office dress was busy arranging a bunch of colorful blind box toys on his desk like she was prepping for a live stream sale. Even without filters or polished edits, I recognized her instantly, Lauren Steele, the self-declared star of those braggy videos. She frowned, her glossy lips curling with annoyance, like I had just crashed her private party. "Who are you? Do you even know where you are barging into?" Her voice was sharp like a knife, but I just walked in calmly, sat down on the soft leather sofa, my gaze drifting past her like I was eyeing a discounted item. "This company isn't just for you to look at," I replied, "but I guess you're the only one here without a brain." Lauren blinked, confused. Someone who made it past security, reception, and the assistants outside the CEO's office without being stopped. And she thought she could question me? Basic employee etiquette? Clearly not her strength. A soft knock on the door. Emily, Richard's longtime assistant, peeked in, her eyes twinkling with barely hidden amusement as she glanced at Lauren. "Mrs. Bennett, CEO Hayes, is still in a meeting with CEO Brown. He'll be back shortly," she emphasized Mrs. Bennett, like a deliberate reminder to someone in the room about who I was, then added, with a hint of sarcasm, "It's been a while since you waited here for CEO Hayes." I gave her a soft smile, my fingers grazing the edge of a magazine on the table. "Been busy with school lately." Lauren stood there, glaring at me like she wanted to bore holes through my face, but I simply looked up, feigning confusion. "Is there a problem?" She snapped back to reality, plastering on a sugar-sweet smile, her voice suddenly soft and sweet. "Hello, Mrs. Bennett. I'm CEO Hayes' new secretary, Lauren Steele. You can call me Sweetie. That's what he usually calls me." I didn't even glance at her, just flipped another page of the magazine, responding coolly. "You can call me Claire, or Mrs. Bennett." Lauren stood there, eyes gleaming with smug satisfaction, hand over her mouth, like she'd just uncovered some huge secret. "You're really pitiful, Claire," she said, fake sympathy dripping from her tone. "Your name sounds like someone who grew up in a slum, not the least bit elegant." She paused, twirling a strand of her golden hair, then added proudly, "My family's different. My parents carefully picked names for me and my brother." Very upscale sounding, I looked up, my gaze icy as it sliced through her pointless boasting. "Sorry, I'm an only child, so I don't bother with name politics," I said, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. "But I don't make it a habit to let people insult me so cheaply, sweetie." Lauren froze, her smile stiffened like she'd been doused with ice water, lips pressed tight, eyes blinking like a warning light. She quickly changed the subject, pointing to the juice and snack boxes on the desk. "These are juices I prepared for CEO Hayes. He's been really into them lately. And these snacks are from a famous restaurant." I cut her off, still flipping pages, voice flat. "Could you go downstairs to the cafe and get me a latte?" "I don't need anything else." Thanks. Lauren stood frozen. Movements halted, her smile frozen in place. She muttered, "Yes," then turned and walked out, her steps heavy like she was dragging a boulder. A few minutes later, Lauren returned with Richard, her eyes red and watery like she had just cried, playing the part of a wronged princess. Richard carried a bag and walked over to me, voice gentle but slightly scolding. "Coffee at this hour? You won't be able to sleep tonight." He opened the bag and pulled out a steaming container of soup, the aroma filling the room. "A new soup place opened next door. Try this," he said, stirring gently. "It's still hot. Let it cool a bit first." Lauren stood at the door, stealing glances at Richard, hoping he'd defend her. But he didn't even look at her, his full attention on the soup, as if she didn't exist. Lauren turned and ran out like she was about to break down. Richard sighed, voice light like it was just a minor annoyance. "She's just a new employee. Don't let little things get to you." What company still treats secretaries the old-fashioned way? For a law student, that attitude's a bit strange. I looked straight at his face. The same gentle expression from years ago, with those calm eyes and that smile that once made me fall for him. But now he used that very same face to scold me over another woman. I smirked, my voice cutting and cold. The way she barked at me earlier didn't seem like a new employee, more like the lady of this office. Richard's hand, still holding the spoon, trembled slightly as if shocked by electricity, his eyes darting away. He sighed again, sounding weary. "Young people nowadays, always ranting about fixing workplace culture. You've been listening to too much office gossip. That's why you're so paranoid." At that, I laughed. I remembered a psychology seminar on love back in college when the professor said, "The cruelest kind of partner is someone who seems loving on the outside but holds no real respect for you. They blame you for everything, never own up to their wrongs, and cheat without guilt." So-called love never lasts. It all comes down to the other person's character. Act 5. After the tense encounter at the office, I went home first and sat in my study, quietly reviewing the civil code. The door creaked open, and Richard walked in, carrying the chill of the night air along with a sugary sweet scent. Lauren's perfume, cloying like gummy candy, making me frown slightly. "Knew you wouldn't be asleep yet," he said, in that familiar gentle voice. "It's getting colder tomorrow. Remember to dress warm when you go out." He casually placed a paper bag on the table, the sweet smell of pastries filling the air. "Macarons, your favorite." Then he turned to grab his things and head to the bathroom. I carelessly opened the pastry box. Inside were colorful little cakes, but one had already been bitten into. On it was a smudged red stain, like lipstick, familiar. It matched perfectly with the video Lauren had just posted on TikTok. Central Park at sunset is so beautiful, and snow at 11 p.m. feels so romantic. She held a tiny cake, opening her mouth wide for the camera. And around her neck was the warm knit scarf I had picked out myself for Richard last Christmas, its bright red fringe dangling like a blinding reminder. When Richard came out of the shower, it was close to midnight. His hair was still dripping, and the scent of masculine soap lingered in the air. He brought in a neatly wrapped gift box and came looking for me in the study. "Tomorrow's Christmas Eve. I have to travel for work, so I can't be with you," he said. "This is a special gift I picked just for you." I took the box, placed it gently on the table, then resumed flipping through my book, my finger resting on a clause about divorce. "Aren't you going to try it?" he asked, frowning a little, visibly surprised, his brows raised like he wasn't used to my indifference. "The store clerk said this is the most popular silk scarf, worth half a year of your salary." We'd been together 5 years, married for 3. Richard had always bought me gifts, from silver jewelry when we were broke, to luxury watches, and designer bags worth thousands, wrapped in fancy paper. Before today, I probably would have pretended to be surprised, gently touched the gift, and praised it nonstop. But now, I couldn't even fake it anymore. I just sat there, eyes cold. "Richard, do you want to talk to me for a minute?" I asked, voice calm but firm. He hesitated, brows knitting slightly, gaze avoiding mine for a beat. The company's been pushing hard to land the Claire Hayes international contract. It's been crazy, he replied, sounding tired. Holidays come every year. You're my wife. You can't only see my success and ignore the long nights and effort behind it. I know you want to be the kind of woman who's always pampered, but I need you to understand me a little. Be realistic, Claire. I calmly pushed the box of French fries toward him. Richard's pupils contracted instantly. He cleared his throat awkwardly and reached for the box with trembling hands. The shop owner is probably old, didn't notice, and accidentally packed the leftovers I ate, he stammered. He quickly shut the lid, fumbling. I won't eat anymore. What do you want? I'll cook. No need, I said, my voice soft but firm enough to make him stop cold, his whole body freezing in place. Because I'd never rejected his gestures of apology or affection before. He turned back to look at me, a little helpless, his brow furrowed tight. Lunch was with some partners. You know, no one actually eats at those kinds of business dinners, he continued, trying to justify. Then in the evening, we didn't have time to eat, so we stopped by. Don't explain. I cut him off, pulling out my phone and pausing the video exactly where his face appeared in Lauren's clip. He instinctively stared at the screen, panic written all over his face, lips pressed tight. That was just someone wanting to eat more. Ordering extra food isn't a big deal, he muttered. You don't understand business. Don't sit at home all day spinning nonsense and getting suspicious over nothing. His voice rose, fists tightening like he'd finally found his excuse to strike back. I sighed, looking at him with obvious irritation and weariness. I remember last month when we were on a work trip in San Francisco. You had stomach pain just from a few bites of spicy food, I said. I asked to order milk, but you told me, drinking milk at that kind of event is embarrassing. Richard looked away, clearly flustered. She just graduated college. You're 30. Why are you competing with a kid? I'm not, I replied, closing my book, standing and walking over to the printer. In my hand was the divorce agreement I had already prepared. That's why I'm choosing divorce. Richard froze, staring at me like he couldn't believe what he'd heard, mouth hanging open. You want to divorce me over something this small? Yes, I said, glancing toward the gift box, nodding firmly, my eyes unwavering. For an entire month, Richard didn't bother setting foot back home. I still went to work as usual, mornings teaching law at the university, afternoons flipping through legal documents, and evenings tidying up photos and videos on my phone. Richard, it turned out, was off enjoying himself in Las Vegas, with none other than Lauren Steele, his self-proclaimed Little Sunshine secretary. They watched blazing sunsets together on the Strip, neon lights sparkling in their eyes, rode cable cars in San Francisco to snap check-in photos, smiling wide like a couple freshly in love, then walked in and out of casinos in Vegas hand in hand, like the whole world was their stage. I sat there, sipping a cold cup of coffee, calmly scrolling through all the pictures and videos I had saved on my phone. The more evidence I gathered of emotional betrayal and inappropriate behavior, the faster the court would approve my divorce. If it hadn't been for the upcoming visit from Richard's parents, Robert and Susan, he and Lauren probably would have kept frolicking around for a few more days. Richard and I were legally married, but we never held a wedding ceremony, partly because I didn't want the spectacle, and partly because Robert and Susan never accepted me. Back then, even when Richard was just a scrappy entrepreneur with a worn-out laptop, they dreamed of their son marrying a bubbly girl who fit right into the Westchester elite. Not someone like me, a woman they saw as unremarkable, who didn't even bother involving family in something as big as marriage. But tonight, as I stepped into the upscale Italian restaurant where they were having dinner, the scene before me nearly froze me in place. Richard, Lauren, Robert, and Susan sat around a table draped in white silk, candlelight flickering over glasses of red wine. Lauren, acting the perfect daughter-in-law, poured water for Susan with a sugary smile, then served food to Robert. Richard sat across from her, gazing at Lauren with soft eyes, his expression glowing with pride and contentment, as if she were some rare jewel he'd just discovered. I stood there, fingers clenched tightly around my purse strap, feeling the blood in my body turn to ice. Cold, sharp, bone deep. I glanced at the calendar on my phone. Just a few more days until winter break. The perfect time to proceed with the divorce. It wouldn't disrupt my work, wouldn't interfere with my teaching schedule. I thought I'd go my whole life without ever having to see Richard's parents again. But this morning, they suddenly showed up at my apartment door. Susan walked in, her expensive fur coat fluttering behind her, face full of displeasure, lips pressed tight like she was chewing on a lemon. "No wonder my son can't stand you, having to face that cold expression of yours every day," she snapped the moment she stepped in. "Just look at you. You two were never a match." Susan gave me a sharp once-over from head to toe, her eyes like razor blades, then continued. "Richard hasn't come home for a whole month, and you didn't even bother to ask once. I really don't understand what my son ever saw in you." I was already too used to her relentless sarcasm after 3 years of marriage, so I pretended not to hear, replying flatly, "Richard's not here." Susan let out a dismissive snort, dripping with contempt. "I came here to wait for him." I feigned a little of realization, nodding along like some background actor in a bad play, then casually poured 2 glasses of water and set them on the living room table. "Well, I've got some work to do. Feel free to make yourselves at home," I said, and walked toward my study. I hadn't even shut the door when Susan's voice rang out. "You see?" Robert, sitting quietly on the sofa, nodded in agreement, his voice low and solemn, like he was delivering a speech. "Lauren is much more compatible with Richard." Hearing her husband praise Lauren seemed to recharge Susan's energy. "She even wants a divorce." I stood just behind the half-closed door. Their voices outside dropped to a lower, more deliberate tone. "Fine, let her have the divorce, but there's no way we're letting that girl take a single cent of our son's money. Everything she wears, everything she spends, it all comes from Richard. I'm going to teach her a lesson." Robert nodded, his voice cold. "I've already made it clear to our son. She's got no one backing her. Just throw her 50, 60 grand, and she'll be gone in no time." I stared at the security monitor, watching their faces, calculating, manipulative, full of strategy. Then I picked up the divorce agreement I had just finalized, the third version, and tore it to pieces. So be it. Richard won't get to keep anything from me either. Act 8. There was another noise outside. Richard had returned. He walked straight into the bedroom without even looking at me, his hand sweeping across the wardrobe as he quickly gathered a few suits and dress shirts with mechanical precision. Then he stepped over and stood in front of me. "There's a party in 2 days," he said, face cold as ice, completely devoid of emotion. "You're going with me." His voice was distant, more like he was ordering an employee than speaking to his wife. "Claire, go out more. Don't turn into the kind of person you hate the most." He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes flickering with something like regret. But it vanished quickly as he turned away, his gaze darkening. He led his parents out of the apartment, Susan's laughter echoing down the hallway. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving the room thick with tension, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out. I walked over to each window and flung them open. Cold wind rushed in immediately. It was freezing, but sharp enough to wake me up. 2 days later would be the biggest reception of the year, hosted by Claire Hayes International, held at the luxury hotel where the city's most powerful people would gather. Act 9. That afternoon, Richard had someone deliver an outfit, along with matching jewelry. A text popped up on my phone. "I already had someone coordinate everything for you. There'll be a lot of important people at tonight's event. This isn't like going to the university." Before I could respond, another message followed, each word like a command. "I'll pick you up at 6. I glanced at the dress. I didn't even need to guess who picked it. Definitely not Richard, but Lauren. The secretary with Instagram taste and ambition bigger than $1 million contract. But if we're talking about what's appropriate to wear to a Haze event, who would know better than me? At exactly 6, a sleek black Bentley pulled up in front of the building. Richard sat in the back seat, his suit perfectly tailored. Beside him was Lauren, radiant in a tight-fitting dress with a plunging neckline. She lowered the window. "Good evening, Mrs. Bennett. I'm sitting with Richard to go over some work matters." She tilted her head slightly, wearing the innocent look of a Disney princess. "You don't mind, do you, Mrs. Bennett?" I got into the car. "If I minded, would you get out?" Lauren's smile froze. She turned to Richard, her voice soft and aggrieved. "I told you I should have just taken a cab." Richard, face expressionless, simply replied, "Didn't you still need to report some things?" Tonight, it was clear he wanted to teach me a lesson, to remind me exactly where I stood. I lowered my eyes, pretending not to care, and discreetly lifted my phone, snapping a photo of both of them. They were wearing coordinated colors. Even Richard's cufflinks and Lauren's jewelry matched, like they'd been styled as a couple. Everything about it was deliberate. We arrived at the most luxurious hotel in Westchester, where Claire Hayes International was hosting the year's biggest reception. Crystal chandeliers gleamed, red wine swirled in glasses, and the laughter of high society filled the room. Richard's business associates had already arrived. Lauren stayed close to him, practically glued to his side, and threw me a smug glance over her shoulder, like she had just won a round of poker. "Good evening, Mr. Bennett." "Miss Steele," said a man, David, his smile polite. Lauren giggled. "David! Just yesterday you were calling me sweetie. Why so formal tonight?" The crowd chuckled, and someone chimed in. "Exactly. You call her sweetie over drinks, but Miss Steele when you're sober." "David's in trouble now," another joked. "Next time he'll have to throw a party just to make it up to Sweetie." "That's right. You can't have a party without Sweetie. She's the life of it. You'd be lucky to keep things quiet with her around." Laughter rippled through the crowd. People exchanged handshakes and looks, flattering Richard, the only person here who could sign the deal with Claire Hayes International and take his company to the next level. I stood quietly in a corner, just watching. David glanced over and saw me, looking momentarily confused. "And this is—" Richard's smile faltered. His tone went flat. "This is my wife." The air shifted. The room went still. All eyes moved from me to Lauren, then back to Richard. He looked uncomfortable, his fingers tightening around his wine glass. "She's not really into parties like this," he added, trying to regain his usual tone. Emily, a female guest nearby, spoke up with biting sarcasm. "Oh? I thought Miss Steele here was your wife. You two are dressed so perfectly together." Richard finally looked at me, and his expression darkened when he realized I wasn't wearing the dress he sent, but instead, my usual simple work attire, calm and quietly out of place amid all the luxury. "Lauren is my secretary," he said coldly, then glanced at me. "Claire, go introduce yourself." Just then, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then glared at me. "I need to check on the car." A hotel staff member had just informed him the driver had left in a rush due to an emergency, and the Bentley hadn't been parked properly. Its front bumper was scratched. Richard turned to leave, but Lauren grabbed his arm. "Richard, the Hayes reps are about to arrive. You have to be here when they walk in." "Yeah, Richard," someone else added. "The event starts in 5 minutes." His steps faltered, hesitation flashing across his face, his fingers gripping his phone. Lauren turned to me with a sweet, fake expression of concern. "Actually, I was supposed to go," she said, "but, these business things, I don't think Mrs. Bennett is quite up to speed." She smiled. "So sorry to trouble you, Mrs. Bennett." The room fell silent, as if the entire ballroom had stopped breathing. Some looked at me, some at Richard, every glance different, curious, pitying, or amused. Lauren had given a plausible excuse, but everyone present understood what it really meant. a public humiliation, casting me into the role of the outsider. Richard frowned, a flicker of conflict crossing his face, but his phone buzzed again, cutting off whatever thought he might have had. "Go and come back quickly," he said, not even looking at me, his voice dry, like a command. I didn't argue. I simply nodded and walked out of the ballroom. Because in that, Bentley was something far more important to me than standing here as a prop for Lauren. The dash cam. I returned to the ballroom. The event had officially begun. The representatives from Claire Hayes International had finished their greetings, and the guests had scattered throughout the venue. I found a dessert table nearby and stood still, not moving an inch. Not far from me, a few suited men wearing Hayes badges gave me a polite nod. Then, one of them suddenly did a double take and whispered to the man next to him, just loud enough to hear, "Those earrings, aren't they the pair that went for $5 million at the auction in New York last month?" The other narrowed his eyes and nodded thoughtfully. "They are. Can't believe we're seeing them here." A third chimed in, voice tinged with regret. "I wanted to bid on them too, but the price got way too high." Two female guests suddenly appeared beside me, eyes locked on the seemingly understated pair of earrings on my ears, twinkling like little stars. I turned slightly and gave a faint smile, lips curved gently, saying nothing. Emily, one of the two, lit up. "Wait, weren't you the one who went outside to check on the car?" The other giggled. "So Richard does love his wife after all. Gifted her a pair of $5 million earrings?" Emily shook her head, her voice laced with doubt. "Richard's company isn't that big to be spending like that." "I don't buy it." Her words, quiet but edged with disbelief, were loud enough for the surrounding guests to catch. For a split second, the atmosphere seemed to freeze. Eyes started shifting, some toward me, some toward Richard, who was standing at the center of the room. A few steps away, Lauren tightened her grip on her wine glass, lips curling into a mocking smile. "They're not knockoffs, are they?" "Mrs. Bennet, aren't you afraid of embarrassing your husband?" Richard, who had been watching me from the start, suddenly darkened, his brows furrowed. His voice turned glacial. "Why do you always have to embarrass me?" I met his eyes calmly, my tone steady. "And what does any of this have to do with you?" Richard gripped his glass tighter, his knuckles turning pale, and his voice rose. "Yeah, that's exactly what I want to ask. I've fed you, clothed you, given you a decent life, protected your image. What more do you want from me?" Before I could respond, Lauren cut in. "If Mrs. Bennet's not happy, this probably isn't the time to bring it up. Today's important for Richard. Maybe you should head home early." Just then, a hotel staff member in a crisp black suit walked over, voice polite. "Mr. Bennet, Mr. Michael is inviting you and your wife to the private room." Richard froze for a beat, then quickly switched to a courteous smile. "Of course." The staff member looked at me and asked, "Is this your wife?" "Then please join us." Richard glanced at me, his voice low but firm. "When we're inside, don't say anything. Just sit quietly," Lauren added, voice sweet but sharp. "Mrs. Bennet, please don't make a scene." This partnership means a lot to Richard and to Claire Hayes International. Especially for the future of his company, I kept a calm expression and silently followed behind Richard, listening as he and Lauren chatted back and forth like a well-rehearsed couple. All the while, I was thinking, my lawyer has received every piece of evidence I've collected, and by now is likely drafting the divorce agreement that will finally satisfy me. Entirely. We walked into the private room where Michael Hayes, CEO of Claire Hayes International, sat at the center, a glass of glistening scotch in hand, his sharp gaze slicing through the three of us like a laser. He suddenly smiled, a slow curl of the lips, his voice deep and resonant. "Have a seat. Let me introduce you to the stakeholders on my side. Mr. Bennet, why don't you go ahead and present your proposal in more detail?" Richard sat down, back straight, flipping through his documents with smooth precision, and began to speak. his voice confident, laying out each number and strategy with clarity, reading the room with flawless instinct, clearly outshining his competitors in the field. I had to admit, Richard was a brilliant businessman. Unfortunately, the man himself didn't deserve the success he'd earned. His eyes glinted with smug certainty, like the deal was already in his pocket. Lauren sat beside him, gazing at him with admiring eyes. Michael nodded slightly, his fingers tapping gently on the wooden table, as if contemplating something, then suddenly turned his gaze toward me, voice calm. "Not bad. What do you think, Mrs. Bennet?" The room fell silent for 3 full seconds, the ticking of the wall clock echoing sharply in the quiet. Lauren couldn't help herself. She let out a laugh. "She's just here as company, Mr. Hayes." "You must have asked the wrong person." Michael narrowed his eyes slightly, his tone flat but razor sharp. "Her opinion is my opinion." Richard's hand, mid-air with his glass of water, froze. Lauren bit her lip, her eyes flashing with frustration, though she tried to keep her composure. "This is a business deal between 2 companies. Michael, no matter what, you can't possibly let someone unrelated—" "Unrelated?" A senior manager from Hayes interrupted, glancing at Lauren with a smirk. "What's this?" The largest shareholder of Hayes is now just someone unrelated because a secretary said so? Richard's glass slipped from his hand, crashing onto the table, water spilling all over his gray suit. He looked up in panic. "Who is she?" Michael let out a quiet sigh, his voice tired but cuttingly cold, his eyes sweeping across Richard like one would look at a fool. "It seems Mr. Bennet knows absolutely nothing about his own wife. You probably didn't know. The Claire in Claire Hayes comes from my sister's name." At the end of that night's event, I immediately handed Richard the divorce agreement my lawyer had just finalized. "I was planning to wait a few more days to give this to you," I said, "but now, I don't want to wait even one more second." Richard looked at me, eyes filled with disbelief, though I couldn't tell whether it was because of who I really was, or because I actually wanted a divorce. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I won't hold it against you for hiding your identity. But I won't agree to a divorce either." "You won't agree?" I tilted my head, a cold smirk rising as my eyes swept over him like I was staring at a stranger. "You really thought I didn't know what was going on between you and your secretary?" Richard clenched the agreement in his hand. "There's nothing between us, strictly professional." "If you don't want her around, I'll fire her right now." I nodded seriously, locking eyes with him, those eyes that now held a glimmer of desperate hope, then spoke slowly, each word cutting deep. "Richard, you took her on trips, walked the same streets we once walked together, ate the same meals we used to share, did things that only a husband and wife should do. Through all of that, was there even one moment you felt guilty?" He opened his mouth, but I continued. "Who would put a half-eaten pastry back into the box? Unless she wanted me to find it. I used to think you weren't stupid, but now I'm starting to wonder. Or maybe you just think I am." Richard rubbed his head, clearly rattled, trying to come up with an excuse. His voice stumbled. "It's not like that, Claire. Everything I did, I just wanted to get a reaction out of you." "I felt like you didn't understand me at all." I cut him off, my voice sharp and cold. "So this past Christmas, was that a business trip or a vacation with her?" Richard froze, visibly shaken, eyes blinking rapidly. You found out." I opened Lauren's TikTok page and placed my phone right in front of him. The screen lit up with video after video. Richard, holding her phone, scrolling through each clip with trembling fingers, traveling together, working together, eating, laughing, playing, video after video, endless. He sat there, stunned, eyes locked on the screen. "Claire, please, just let me explain." I cut him off again, voice unwavering. "Your explanation doesn't matter. My thinking and my decision are what matter. And right now, all I want is a divorce. For 30 years of my life, I've been abandoned more times than I can count. My father chose to betray me, and my mother to be with another woman. My mother, crushed by betrayal, gave up on everything, including me. So when love for someone else and love for myself become a multiple choice question where I can only pick one answer, I won't let anyone else choose it for me. I told myself, if I've decided to move forward, then I'll go all the way forward. Even if there's a brick wall ahead, even if I crash into it head first, I will not turn back. Richard knew better than anyone that betrayal is the one thing I despise most. Yet he, the person I trusted the most, became the one who stabbed me in the deepest, most painful way. Richard lowered his head, like someone who had just been dealt a crushing blow. I kept speaking, my voice steady and composed. I said divorce, so you can bet I've come fully prepared. And don't forget what my field of expertise is. And never, ever underestimate it. The day I officially cut ties with Richard, Lauren was fired too. I didn't have to ask. She made sure the world knew herself, like her existence needed to be validated by the internet. Set to a melodramatic piano soundtrack, she sat in a room filled with fresh flowers, holding a teacup and smiling softly, her voice trembling. I've resigned. In the end, I still lost to the power of money. I stared quietly at the screen, then scrolled down to the comment section. A familiar crowd, half pitying, half mocking. It's just a secretary job. Why is she acting like she stepped down as CEO? Another wrote, Quit? You sure it wasn't got fired? And someone added sarcastically, Fake assistant, real mistress. That ending was obvious. I could see the forced smile in her video trembling, and within 30 minutes, it was gone. Reported and wiped clean. An hour later, Lauren's account displayed a cold message, deactivated. Over the next 2 months, mutual acquaintances occasionally whispered to me. Richard was clinging to his work, practically living at the office, using it to fill the void left by his broken marriage. They told me I should reconsider, that maybe I should give him another chance. I just gave a faint smile and quietly started deleting contacts from my phone. Every piece of advice was another number blocked. I deleted so thoroughly that our shared contact list was nearly empty. No one left standing in between us. When friends no longer worked, Richard started sending messages, finding excuses to meet. I never replied. I just picked up my phone and typed a message to Michael Hayes, my half-brother. Such a small company, and he still couldn't manage it. Followed people for years, and didn't learn a single useful thing. Just 3 days later, the name Bennett vanished from the company sign. Richard's firm had officially changed hands. That's right. The assets that could be split I took. The ones that couldn't, Hayes acquired. I stood by the office window, the city lights casting shadows across my face, and felt a strange emptiness. A marriage, 8 years of youth, all now reduced to a few lines on legal documents, some transferred assets, and a man who had disappeared from the social elite's guest lists as if he never existed. Half a year later, Michael Hayes came to see me. He held the certificate of Hayes shares in his hand, eyes full of quiet mockery. Can't believe I even changed my last name just to please him, he said. And in the end, he still left everything to you. That young CEO, Michael, he never actually carried the Hayes name. The sole heir of the Hayes family didn't carry that name either. Michael had taken on my father's surname to win him over. As for me, out of hatred for my biological father, I had chosen to carry my grandfather's name, the man who raised me. Ever since my grandparents passed, no major life decision of mine had required anyone else's approval. And as for the things that were meant to be mine, I would never let anyone take them away so easily. Even so, in the end, I still chose to hand over operational control of Claire Hayes International to Michael. With his skill and cunning, Michael could have taken over at least half of Hayes years ago. It was well within his reach. Taking me down wouldn't have been hard either. But he never did, almost as if he'd always known what I would decide. When I finally said the words, there wasn't even a flicker of surprise on his face. Instead, he calmly brought up people who should have long been buried in memory. Ever since Richard's repeated failures, Michael had stopped making things difficult because he understood. For someone who once stood at the top, then plummeted to the bottom, now trapped in darkness, haunted day after day by failure and regret, that was the cruelest punishment of all. Now, Richard survives on a meager salary. As for Lauren, blacklisted in the industry, it's nearly impossible for her to land a job at any major firm. As I turned to leave, Michael suddenly looked back and asked, "Do you regret it?" Those 8 years. I paused, thought for a few seconds, then gently shook my head. A love that was clear, a resentment that was firm, a joy that was honest, and a bit of timely calculation. I wasn't the one who did wrong, and I'm not the one who should feel regret. All I needed was to keep moving forward, with no need to look back. I stopped by the office window, gazing down at the city glowing beneath the night lights. My fingers gently touched the sparkling earrings, the reflected light gleaming like a final full stop to the past. Then I removed my wedding ring, set it down on the wooden desk, the soft clink echoing through the stillness. Without looking back, I pushed the door open and walked out. Thank you for staying with me until the very last minute of this story. If this story touched something in you, please hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next ones. And don't forget to leave a comment. I read every single one.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.